Introduction. Sometimes history doesn't add up. A map drawn before its time. A machine that shouldn't exist. Artifacts that don't fit the timeline. These are real discoveries, and they challenge everything we thought we knew. Tonight, we explore the impossible. Get ready for the mysteries that break history. Piri Reis Map. In the archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, there lies a fragment of an ancient map. It is drawn on a piece of gazelle skin, carefully inked and colored, bearing inscriptions in Ottoman Turkish. At first glance, it looks like many old maritime maps of the early 16th century, but as you look closer, something begins to feel off. This is the Piri Reis Map, dated 1513. It was created by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis, who compiled it using a number of older source maps. Some, he claimed, going back to the time of Alexander the Great. Only a third of the full world map survives. But the fragment alone has stirred decades of controversy and fascination. What makes this map so special? It's not merely its age or craftsmanship. It's what it appears to show, and what it shouldn't possibly know. The map accurately outlines the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and most mysteriously of all, a section of land that some believe resembles the northern coast of Antarctica. But here's the catch. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years after the map was drawn. And even then, the continent was thought to be entirely covered in ice. But the real twist is this. The landmass shown on the Piri Reis map appears free of ice. It closely matches the subglacial coastline of Antarctica as revealed by modern seismic and radar measurements. A view we only gained in the 20th century through advanced ground-penetrating technology. How could a 16th century admiral have drawn something we didn't even know existed until the 20th? Some scholars believe the answer lies in Piri Reis's own notes on the map. He wrote that he compiled his work using over 20 older source maps, including Greek, Arabic, and possibly ancient Phoenician charts, some that may have been copied from even earlier maps. There are even claims, hard to verify, that among his sources were maps from the Library of Alexandria, long destroyed. Could it be that remnants of an advanced ancient civilization, perhaps seafaring people whose knowledge has long been lost, had once mapped Antarctica before it was covered in ice? According to some geological estimates, parts of the Antarctic coastline may have been ice-free more than 6,000 years ago. This timeline, if connected to the source material for Piri Reis's map, would imply a level of ancient global navigation far beyond what mainstream history accepts. Of course, not everyone agrees. Mainstream cartographers argue that the supposed Antarctic coastline is actually a distorted interpretation of South America, misrepresented due to the limitations of projecting a round Earth onto a flat surface. They suggest that the strange alignment and apparent accuracy could be the result of coincidence, or simply the use of advanced portal-on charts, sailing maps used by navigators based on compass bearings and estimated distances. Skeptics also point out that while the map does include recognizable sections, it is incomplete and uneven. There are mythical creatures drawn in the oceans, speculative islands, and artistic liberties common in maps of the era. Some of the coastlines don't match modern geography at all. So perhaps the Piri Reis map is a hybrid, part reality, part myth, part misunderstanding. Yet even among critics, the map's precision in certain areas continues to raise eyebrows. The proportions of South America, for example, are surprisingly accurate, more so than many European maps drawn decades later. How did Piri Reis access such detailed knowledge? And then there's the question of method. How did ancient cartographers, if they really did chart Antarctica, measure longitudes with the kind of precision we see on the map? Determining longitude requires accurate timekeeping, something that wasn't reliably possible until the 18th century with the invention of the marine chronometer. Could it be that we're underestimating the technological capabilities of ancient civilizations? Or have we misread the map, layering our own desires for mystery and wonder onto a misunderstood historical artifact? In 1960, the U.S. Air Force commissioned a study of the Piri Reis map. One of the analysts, Charles Hapgood, popularized the idea that the map might be evidence of a prehistoric advanced civilization. He wrote extensively about the possibility of an ancient global maritime culture capable of circumnavigating the globe long before the Age of Discovery. Even Albert Einstein commented on Hapgood's theory, calling it interesting and worthy of consideration. Yet, despite these tantalizing threads, no conclusive evidence has emerged. The mystery of the Piri Reis Map remains unresolved. It sits in a glass case, silent and preserved, a sliver of gazelle skin with far too much to say. Whether it is a misunderstood artifact or a genuine echo of a forgotten age, it continues to challenge what we think we know about history. What if the past is deeper, stranger, and more connected than we ever imagined? The Voynich Manuscript. Tucked away in the archives of Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library lies an artifact that has baffled the world's best linguists, cryptographers, historians, and scientists for over a century. Its pages are yellowed with age, its illustrations strange and otherworldly. Its text flows smoothly across each sheet in elegant loops and swirls. Yet no one has ever truly read a word of it. This is the Voynich Manuscript. A book that shouldn't exist, or at least not in the way it does. A book written in a language no one can recognize, using an alphabet found nowhere else. A book that, despite decades of scrutiny, refuses to give up its secrets. Discovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfred Voynich, the manuscript immediately attracted attention and confusion. Bound in vellum and consisting of 240 surviving pages, though some are missing, it was carbon dated to the early 15th century, around the year 1404 to 1438. Yet despite its medieval origin, the script bears no resemblance to Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, or any known medieval language. Even stranger, the writing seems purposeful, not random scribbles or meaningless symbols. The script displays consistent patterns, repeated structures, and even grammatical rules. It's not gibberish. It behaves like a real language. But whose and why? The manuscript is divided into several distinct sections, each more enigmatic than the last. The first is the botanical section, filled with drawings of plants, but almost none of them match any known species. They appear fantastical, hybridized, sometimes with roots shaped like organs or veins. Some scholars suggest they may be symbolic representations or alchemical inventions, rather than real flora. Next is the astronomical section, which shows star patterns, suns, and circular diagrams, some resembling zodiac wheels. But even here, things don't quite line up with our sky. The zodiac signs are mismatched, and the stars don't correspond to any recognized constellations. It's as if the author was charting a universe parallel to our own. Then comes the biological section, arguably the most bizarre of all. It's filled with illustrations of nude women bathing in pools of green liquid, often connected by elaborate tubing or floating in interconnected chambers. Some of these strange tubes resemble reproductive organs, others cellular structures. To modern eyes, it almost looks like an allegorical diagram of human anatomy, or something closer to genetics or microbiology, created centuries before those fields existed. Following this is a section sometimes referred to as pharmaceutical or herbal, with drawings of jars and plants arranged like recipes. Finally, the recipes section features pages of densely packed text, grouped into short paragraphs marked with stars. These may be incantations, instructions, or medical notes. We simply don't know. Over the past century, countless experts have tried to decode the Voynich manuscript. Cryptographers from World War II, including codebreakers who cracked the infamous Nazi Enigma code, tried and failed. Linguists attempted to find roots in known languages. Some proposed it might be an early constructed language, even a form of glossolalia, speaking in tongues. Statistical analysis reveals that the script obeys Zipf's law, a pattern found in all natural human languages, where more common words appear more frequently. This alone suggests it is not a hoax. A fake language created by a medieval prankster would almost certainly lack the statistical complexity we see in the manuscript. And yet, no one has cracked it. No Rosetta Stone.
No breakthrough.
No understanding of even a single word. Several theories have emerged over time. Some believe it to be a coded language, hiding secret knowledge, perhaps medicinal or magical. Others think it's an alchemical text, its knowledge encoded through symbols and invented script, accessible only to a select few. There are also theories of alien origin, or that it contains knowledge from a lost civilization. More grounded hypotheses suggest that the manuscript may be the work of a lone genius, constructing an imaginary world and its accompanying language, a kind of medieval Tolkien, centuries before the Lord of the Rings. One of the most provocative possibilities is that the Voynich Manuscript may be a medical or gynecological guide written for or by women, in a secret code to protect its contents. The numerous female figures, the plant-based illustrations, and the anatomical diagrams all point in that direction. But again, this is speculation, and speculation is all we have. There have even been claims in recent years that the manuscript was decoded. In 2019, a Canadian researcher suggested it was written in an obscure dialect of Hebrew. In 2020, artificial intelligence models claimed it may have roots in Romance languages. Yet none of these interpretations have stood up to peer review. The scholarly consensus remains the same. We still don't know what it says. And perhaps that's what draws us to it, the mystery itself. In a world where so much has been uncovered, studied, digitized, and explained, the Voynich Manuscript remains stubbornly silent. It resists every effort to classify, decode, or rationalize it. It stands as a strange mirror to our curiosity, reminding us that not everything in our world can be understood through logic alone. Is it a doorway to forgotten knowledge? A guide from another era? A brilliant puzzle never meant to be solved? Or is it simply the work of an imaginative mind, lost to time? Whatever the answer, the Voynich Manuscript holds its ground, whispering in a voice we can't yet hear, but somehow still feel. The Ica Stones. In the arid deserts of southern Peru, near the ancient Nazca lines and forgotten pre-Columbian tombs, a peculiar collection of artifacts began to surface in the early 1960s. Rounded, river-smooth andesitic stones, black, gray, and occasionally bluish, each etched with mysterious images. Some were small enough to hold in the palm of your hand, others the size of a suitcase. But it wasn't their shape or color that drew the world's attention. It was what was carved into them. The Ica Stones, as they came to be known, seemed to depict an impossible history. Engraved across their surfaces were scenes of humans living alongside dinosaurs, performing complex surgeries, peering through telescopes, and operating what appeared to be advanced machines. All in a context that should not have existed. A surgeon conducting a heart transplant. A man riding what looks eerily like a triceratops. A group of people gazing at the stars through a device resembling a modern observatory. If authentic, these stones would rewrite everything we know about the timeline of human civilization. The collection gained worldwide attention through the efforts of Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquilla, a respected Peruvian physician and professor. In the mid-1960s, Cabrera was given one of the stones as a birthday gift. It bore the image of an extinct fish species. Intrigued, he began collecting more, ultimately amassing over 11,000 stones in a private museum he established in Ica, Peru. To Cabrera, these stones were not frauds or local art. They were the records of a lost civilization, one that predates all others. He proposed that these people were technologically advanced, had mastered medicine, astronomy, and even genetics, and had witnessed dinosaurs with their own eyes. In his view, the Ica Stones were a form of prehistoric archive, like the carved memory of an ancient supercivilization. But from the very beginning, skepticism surrounded the discovery. Local farmers and grave robbers admitted, some eagerly, others under pressure, that they had forged many of the stones for money. One of them, Bailo Usquia, claimed to have used a dentist's drill and boot polish to create the carvings and age them artificially. He said that foreign tourists and collectors would pay good money for the stones, and so he made what they wanted to see. Under Peruvian law, selling antiquities was illegal, so admitting they were fakes protected them legally. However, Usquia would later recant his confession in interviews, saying he had been forced to deny the stones' authenticity to avoid legal trouble. He insisted that while some fakes may exist, the vast majority, particularly those collected by Cabrera, were genuine, unearthed from ancient tombs in the surrounding desert. This back and forth only deepened the mystery. If some were fake, could all be fake? And if even a handful were real, what then? Attempts to date the stones scientifically have proven inconclusive. The stones themselves are ancient, volcanic andesite that could be millions of years old, but the carvings? Lacking organic material or pigment, they can't be carbon dated. Some experts point to the sharpness of the engravings as evidence that they are relatively modern. Others argue that the desert's arid conditions could preserve engravings for thousands of years with minimal wear. But the real crux of the controversy lies in the content. Mainstream scientists point out that dinosaurs and humans are separated by more than 60 million years of evolutionary history. The idea that they coexisted is biologically and geologically impossible according to all known fossil records. Additionally, there is no supporting archaeological evidence, no tools, no structures, no human remains, indicating an advanced pre-Ice Age civilization in the region. Yet believers counter with their own logic. If such a civilization existed, and it fell, might it not have left behind only fragments? Could the Ica Stones be the last surviving whispers of a culture that saw and did things beyond what we imagine possible? The imagery itself adds to the puzzle. Some of the surgeries depicted involve procedures not attempted until the 20th century. Astronomical diagrams show planets in precise orbits. And the scenes of dinosaurs are uncannily detailed, not crude approximations or artistic inventions, but anatomically specific renderings, including dinosaurs that were not widely reconstructed or understood in the 1960s. Is this merely a case of copying from encyclopedias and science books of the time, as skeptics suggest? Or do the stones reflect knowledge that should not have been available, unless it had somehow been passed down? One haunting theory suggests that the stones were not made by the people they depict, but instead for them, by a long-lost group trying to leave behind a record of what they saw. Others speculate about time travelers, extraterrestrials, or ancient survivors of Atlantis. These ideas, while far from academic consensus, reflect the sheer depth of mystery these artifacts invoke. Today, the academic world largely dismisses the Ica Stones as an elaborate and persistent hoax, a fusion of wishful thinking, forgery, and mythology. Yet, the stones remain, thousands of them, engraved, collected, and displayed, quietly questioning the limits of our historical certainty. Whether they are genuine relics or cleverly made curiosities, they occupy a strange space in our collective imagination. The Ica Stones remind us that history is not always written in books or chiseled into temple walls. Sometimes, it waits quietly beneath the desert sand, real or imagined, daring us to ask the forbidden question: what if everything we know is only part of the story? The Dropa Stones. High in the remote Bayan Har Mountains of western China, near the border with Tibet, where the air thins and the land forgets time, a strange and haunting story begins. It is a tale that has captivated fringe historians, UFO enthusiasts, and mystery seekers alike, not because of what was found, but because of what it seemed to say. In 1938, an alleged expedition led by Chinese archaeologist Chi Pu-ti ventured into a series of unexplored caves nestled in the harsh and isolated mountains of Qinghai. According to later reports, the caves bore signs of deliberate habitation, symmetrical tunnels, carefully aligned burial chambers, and within them, hundreds of small skeletons, each no more than 4 feet tall. Their skulls were unusually large and thin, with prominent eye sockets. Some suggested they were the remains of an unknown race. Others whispered they weren't human at all. But it was not the skeletons that made the expedition legendary. Scattered among the cave floors were dozens, some say hundreds, of stone discs, about 9 inches across. Each one was perfectly circular with a hole in the center, resembling ancient phonograph records. But unlike any record, these discs were carved with an intricate spiral groove, winding from the edge inward like a vortex. Along this groove were tiny, almost microscopic characters, etched with such precision that they could barely be seen with the naked eye. They would come to be known as the Dropa Stones. What followed was decades of controversy, disappearance, and speculation. According to accounts published in the 1960s, Chinese scientists initially dismissed the stones as relics of a primitive mountain tribe. But one man, Professor Tsumam Nui of the Beijing Academy for Ancient Studies, reportedly began studying them under magnification and came to a staggering conclusion. The symbols were a form of writing, and they told a story. A story not of gods or spirits, but of travelers from the stars. According to Tsumam Nui's alleged translation, the discs described the crash landing of a spaceship, not in mythic tones, but in almost clinical detail. The beings on board, called the Dropa, came from another planet, stranded in the mountains after their craft malfunctioned. With no way to return home, they took refuge in the caves, avoided by the local tribes who saw them as otherworldly. Some of the Dropa, the text said, eventually perished. Others interbred with the local people and became part of forgotten history. If true, this would mean the stones were records of an extraterrestrial encounter, preserved not in oral legends, but meticulously carved into stone thousands of years ago. But almost as quickly as the story surfaced, it began to unravel. The first mention of the Dropa stones outside China appeared in a 1962 issue of a Russian magazine, Sputnik, which interviewed Dr. Vyacheslav Syzev, a Soviet scientist who had allegedly seen the stones. Photographs began to circulate. Stone discs with double grooves, concentric circles, and strange pitting. Yet no such discs were ever verified by academic institutions. No original stones have ever been placed in a museum or subjected to modern scientific analysis. The Beijing Academy, where Tsumam Nui supposedly worked, claimed no record of such a professor. Chinese authorities denied the existence of the expedition itself. Still, the story lived on. In the 1970s, Austrian engineer Erich von Däniken, a well-known proponent of ancient astronaut theories, amplified the tale in his books, linking the Dropa stones to other global anomalies, the Nazca lines, the pyramids, the Sumerian texts. He argued that early humanity had been visited, taught, and perhaps even engineered by beings from other worlds, and the Dropa stones, if real, were proof. Other researchers attempted to trace the stones, allegedly locating a few in museums in China, including the Banpo Museum in Xi'an. One photo from the 1990s shows a stone disc in a dusty glass case, labeled ambiguously and with no detailed provenance. Could it be one of the original Dropa stones? Or simply a misidentified artifact from an unrelated culture? Skeptics have strong arguments. No archaeological records support the discovery. No verified translations of the writing exist. And the entire account depends on sources that are unverifiable, secondhand, or sourced from publications with little academic rigor. Many historians and scientists now consider the Dropa stones to be a modern myth, a fusion of Cold War-era mystery, sci-fi fascination, and journalistic embellishment. But here's the part that refuses to fade. Something was found in those mountains. Even dismissing the extraterrestrial claims, local legends from the Ham and Dropa tribes, real ethnic groups in the region, do speak of people from the stars who came in a flying vessel long ago. These stories predate modern UFO lore by centuries. What if these tales and the mysterious discs are echoes, distorted, incomplete, of a real event? Not necessarily alien contact, but perhaps a prehistoric meteor strike, a misunderstood technological relic, or a nomadic group with unusual physical traits and unfamiliar knowledge. We may never know. No original Dropa stone has surfaced in modern laboratories. No cave system has been verified to contain them, and yet, the idea persists not only because people want to believe, but because history still contains silences, blank spaces, and questions we don't know how to ask. In the end, the Dropa stones remain in a liminal space between archaeology and legend, between science and speculation. Whether they were cosmic records or clever fictions, they challenge us with a deeper question. What stories have been lost or hidden in the stone silence of time? The crystal skulls, hidden behind glass cases in museums, in private collections, or surrounded by incense and lore in the hands of spiritual seekers. The crystal skulls exude a presence that is hard to explain. They are carved from single blocks of clear or milky quartz, anatomically accurate, and polished to a gleam so precise it seems almost alive, like frozen thought, suspended in stone. Their origin is a mystery, their purpose unknown, and yet, the fascination they inspire has endured for decades. There are 13 skulls most often discussed in popular lore, though many more exist in circulation. The most famous of all is the Mitchell Hedges skull, a full-sized human skull carved from a single piece of flawless clear quartz, complete with a detachable jaw. It is so precise in its structure, some researchers claimed that even modern technology would struggle to replicate it, especially without leaving behind tool marks. Its discovery is said to have occurred in the 1920s, in the ruins of an ancient Mayan city in Belize. British adventurer F.A. Mitchell Hedges reportedly claimed that his daughter, Anna, found it buried beneath a collapsed altar inside a pyramid. From the moment it surfaced, the skull was surrounded not only by mystery, but by whispers of power, that it caused visions, altered energy, even death. It was called the Skull of Doom by some, and said to have healing or prophetic properties by others. But there's a problem. No archaeological documentation exists for the find. In fact, later records suggest that Mitchell Hedges may have acquired the skull at auction in 1943, after it had already been in the hands of collectors. The Mayan discovery tale, it seems, was an embellishment or worse, a complete fabrication. Still, the Mitchell Hedges skull is only one of many. Other crystal skulls have turned up in Mexico, Guatemala, Brazil, and Central America, often attributed to the Aztec or Maya civilizations, sometimes to even older, unknown cultures. Some are stylized, abstract representations. Others, like the British Museum skull or the Smithsonian skull, show eerily lifelike features. In all cases, the mystery lies not only in what they are, but how they were made and why. Quartz crystal is notoriously hard, harder than steel. To shape and polish it with such finesse would require advanced tools and immense time. Yet many of the skulls, according to initial reports, showed no sign of modern carving methods. In the 1970s, scientists at Hewlett-Packard analyzed the Mitchell Hedges skull and found no evidence of rotary tools, suggesting it may have been shaped by hand, a process that would have taken hundreds, if not thousands, of hours. But modern science would later challenge that conclusion. Subsequent studies using electron microscopy revealed microscopic tool marks consistent with 19th-century mechanical polishing. The British Museum skull and the Smithsonian skull were both found to have likely been carved in Europe in the late 1800s, possibly using techniques developed during the rise of gemstone trading. Furthermore, there's no record of crystal skulls being excavated in situ by archaeologists from any verified ancient Mesoamerican site. Mainstream historians now believe most, if not all, crystal skulls were likely created during the Victorian era, when there was a booming fascination with ancient civilizations and exotic artifacts. Forgers, artists, and merchants were known to create mysterious relics to satisfy European collectors hungry for the mystical and the arcane. So why does the legend persist? Because these skulls are more than artifacts. They're icons. They speak to something primal in us. Our fear of death, our obsession with the soul, our curiosity about civilizations lost. The human skull is a symbol that transcends culture, simultaneously a memento mori and a possible vessel of memory. Some believe the skulls are ancient recording devices, storing knowledge in the crystalline lattice of quartz, waiting for the right frequency, the right energy, to release their secrets. Others claim they are relics from Atlantis, Lemuria, or civilizations not yet remembered by history. New Age traditions speak of the 13 master skulls, each holding a piece of ancient wisdom, destined to be reunited in a future age of awakening. Science does not support these claims, but the mythos continues to grow. Even Hollywood took notice. In Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the idea of the skulls as extraterrestrial artifacts entered the mainstream imagination. Though fictional, the film drew from a reservoir of long-standing beliefs that these relics were not just ceremonial but interdimensional, that they were made by beings who saw more than we do. Could it be that the power of the crystal skulls lies not in quartz but in projection, in the human need to see mystery in the mirror of stone? Or could there be, beneath the layers of forgery and fiction, one skull that predates it all? One that holds a genuine echo from a forgotten world? We don't know, and perhaps that's the point. The crystal skulls rest today under controlled lighting, catalogued by curators, studied by skeptics, and venerated by believers. They are real. You can see them, touch them, photograph them, but the truth about their origin, like the past they seem to represent, remains shrouded in ambiguity. In a world increasingly defined by data and certainty, the crystal skulls remind us that some relics carry not just history, but the memory of mystery. Cold, perfect, and silent, they wait. The London Hammer. In the rolling hills of East Texas, near the small town of London, a curious discovery was made in the summer of 1936. It was a hot afternoon, and a couple named Max and Emma Hahn were out for a walk along a creek bed when something caught their attention. A strange piece of wood protruding from a hunk of weathered rock lying beside the path. Intrigued, they took the rock home and, years later, cracked it open. What they found inside would ignite one of the most persistent mysteries in modern anomalous archaeology. Embedded within the stone was a metal hammer, the head still firmly attached to its wooden handle, part of which had begun to fossilize. The hammer appeared to be of modern manufacture, simple in design but clearly shaped by human hands. The head was made of metal, about 6 inches long, with a perfectly formed symmetrical shape. A band of darker discoloration surrounded the place where the stone had been split, indicating it had fully encased the hammer before it was broken apart. This artifact came to be known as the London Hammer, a name that, ironically, has nothing to do with the British capital, but everything to do with a quiet Texan town, and an even quieter mystery. What made the hammer so strange wasn't the tool itself. Hammers of that type were not uncommon in the 19th century, perhaps a miner's tool or a blacksmith's. But the rock that had formed around it appeared, according to some estimates, to be part of the Lower Cretaceous Formation, possibly over 100 million years old. That's where the questions began. How could a modern tool, a hammer, be encased in solid rock that predates human existence by tens of millions of years? Creationists quickly seized on the artifact, presenting it as a so-called out-of-place object, or OOP art. To them, the London Hammer was potential proof that the Earth was not as old as scientists claimed, that modern humans, or at least human technology, might have coexisted with ancient geological processes far earlier than the mainstream timeline allowed. Others suggested more fantastic origins. Time travelers, ancient civilizations with lost technology, or perhaps even evidence of an intelligent pre-human species whose history has been erased. But skeptics were quick to respond. Geologists argued that the rock surrounding the hammer wasn't as ancient as it seemed. While the region is indeed made up of Cretaceous sediment, the concretion around the hammer, the part that actually encased it, may have formed much more recently. In specific environmental conditions, minerals can harden around objects in mere decades or centuries, especially in limestone-rich areas with fluctuating moisture and temperature. Such formations, known as concretions, are natural and not uncommon. They can give the appearance of great geological age but may form around even recent debris, nails, tools, bones, or shells, under the right conditions. In this case, it's entirely possible that a 19th century miner dropped the hammer, which was then buried and slowly encased in mineral deposits over time. Moreover, metallurgical analysis showed that the hammer's head was composed of 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.74% sulfur, a strange composition not commonly used in modern tools. Some proponents of its anomalous nature pointed to this as evidence of advanced ancient metallurgy. But others suggested it might simply reflect a particular 19th century forging technique, possibly regional or experimental, that is no longer in use today. Despite these explanations, the mystery lingers. The hammer now resides in the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, where it is presented as an object that defies conventional dating methods and supports a young Earth perspective. Visitors are invited to consider the possibility that history as we know it may be far more compressed, or radically different, than what science currently teaches. Yet in academic circles, the artifact is rarely mentioned, largely dismissed as a case of misinterpretation or deliberate sensationalism. No peer-reviewed studies have been published about it, and no geological survey has ever conclusively dated the rock matrix. Most experts see the case as closed. An old hammer, a young concretion, and a very modern misunderstanding. But for many, the allure of the London Hammer is precisely its ambiguity. It's not just about whether it's real, or ancient, or miraculous. It's about what it represents. A crack in the wall of certainty. A suggestion that our timelines, our methods, and even our assumptions might sometimes leave room for error or for wonder. After all, human history is a fragile mosaic built from fragments, gaps, and educated guesses. The hammer, silent in its stone shell, continues to provoke questions far larger than itself. Is it an illusion of anomaly, or a signal from a past we don't yet understand? And what else might lie just beneath the surface, waiting like the simple tool to be broken open? Antikythera Mechanism. In the clear blue waters off the Greek island of Antikythera, nestled between Crete and the Peloponnese, a storm in 1900 drove a group of sponge divers to seek shelter. Little did they know, the ocean floor beneath them concealed the remnants of a shipwreck that would challenge everything we thought we knew about the capabilities of ancient civilizations. Among the statues, pottery, and relics brought up from the seabed over the following months, one object, unassuming at first, would come to redefine the boundaries of ancient science. It was a corroded lump of bronze and wood, fragmented and crusted with centuries of salt. For years, it was largely ignored, catalogued as a curious but unintelligible mess. Then, in 1902, archaeologist Valerio Stays noticed a small gear embedded within the metal. A gear in a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. That single observation opened the door to a mystery that continues to perplex scientists, historians, and engineers over a century later. The object would become known as the Antikythera Mechanism. Dating to around 100 BCE, it is often referred to as the first analog computer, a mechanical device so sophisticated that nothing comparable would be built again for at least 1,500 years. Its presence on a sunken Roman-era ship stunned researchers. The precision, miniaturization, and mechanical complexity required to build it seemed anachronistic, impossible, even. At its core, the Antikythera Mechanism is a geared astronomical calculator. Using a hand crank and a series of intricately interlocking bronze gears, some with triangular teeth, others mounted on axles and rotating in precise harmony, it could predict celestial events, eclipses, moon phases, planetary positions, and even the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. And all this from a device smaller than a shoebox. How could such technology exist in the ancient world? For decades, researchers struggled to decode its function. The mechanism had broken into dozens of fragments, many of which were heavily encrusted or partially destroyed. But as imaging technology improved in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, particularly through X-ray tomography and 3D surface scanning, scientists began to peel back the layers of corrosion and finally glimpse its inner workings. They found over 30 meshing bronze gears, some with hundreds of teeth, precisely cut and coordinated. The inscriptions on its dials, once barely legible, revealed instructions in Koine Greek, referencing cycles of the moon and sun, the Metonic cycle, a 19-year calendar of lunar and solar alignment, and the Saros cycle, which ancient Babylonians had used to predict eclipses. It was, in essence, a device capable of tracking the celestial clockwork of the heavens with astonishing accuracy. What shocked modern engineers wasn't just the concept, but the execution. The design required advanced mathematical understanding, gear-cutting technology, and a working knowledge of astronomical cycles that had long been thought far beyond the reach of the ancient Greeks. Some experts believe it was built by a workshop connected to Hipparchus or Posidonius, legendary Greek astronomers of the Hellenistic era. Others even speculate it may have been influenced by Archimedean engineering, drawing from knowledge now lost to time. But no definitive creator has been identified. Equally mysterious is why no other mechanisms of comparable complexity have ever been found from the same period. The Antikythera Mechanism appears as a singular anomaly, a lone whisper from a civilization whose technological capabilities may have been deeper than we assumed, and whose innovations may have been erased by time, war, or societal collapse. Was the mechanism a rare prototype? A teaching tool? A navigational device? Or was it simply one of many, the only one lucky enough to be preserved at the bottom of the sea? The discovery has forced historians to rethink the narrative of technological evolution. The linear view that technology steadily advanced over time now seems too simplistic. The Antikythera Mechanism hints at a lost cycle of invention and rediscovery, where knowledge once bloomed, only to vanish in the dark folds of history. Today, replicas of the device exist in museums and academic institutions. Engineers have reverse-engineered its design, revealing a level of sophistication that rivals even Renaissance clockwork. But the original still rests in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, its corroded fragments held in a climate-controlled display, a silent challenge to our assumptions about the past. Its very existence asks a profound question. If this was possible in 100 BCE, what else was lost? How many inventions, insights, and marvels sank beneath the waves? Not just in shipwrecks, but in the tides of forgotten knowledge. Baghdad Battery. In the arid heartlands of modern-day Iraq, a land once cradled by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and known as Mesopotamia, the birthplace of civilization, lies a mystery that seems to spark with literal potential. Amid the ruins of long-forgotten cities and empires, archaeologists uncovered a curious object that would ignite one of the most fascinating debates in ancient history. Had electricity been discovered nearly 2,000 years before it should have been? The story begins in 1936, near the village of Kujut Rabu, just outside Baghdad. Workers digging at a site believed to be part of the ancient Parthian Empire unearthed a clay jar about 5 inches tall, sealed with a bitumen stopper. Protruding from the top was an iron rod, which extended down into the jar, and inside, a tightly rolled copper cylinder. The copper and iron elements didn't touch directly, an important detail. At first glance, the object didn't seem like much, just another piece of ancient pottery. But when it came into the hands of Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist and director of the Baghdad Museum at the time, he proposed something shocking. This might be an ancient galvanic cell, a battery. It would come to be known as the Baghdad Battery. If Koenig was right, it meant the ancient Parthians, a civilization thought to be more focused on agriculture, warfare, and empire than on science, had knowledge of electrochemical reactions long before Benjamin Franklin flew a kite or Alessandro Volta built his famous pile. The principle behind it was deceptively simple. A copper cylinder nested inside an iron rod, both suspended in an electrolytic solution like vinegar or lemon juice, can generate a small electric current. Koenig even speculated that when filled with such a liquid, the device could produce 0.5 to 1 volt, enough to tingle the skin or perhaps plate a thin layer of gold or silver onto a small surface. But this hypothesis raised more questions than it answered. If the Baghdad Battery really was a battery, what was it used for? There were no wires, no lighting systems, no obvious use cases for electric power in the ancient world. And why were there no written records of such technology in any surviving texts from the Parthian or Sassanid empires? Some researchers have offered possible explanations. One popular theory suggests the battery was used for electroplating, the process of depositing a thin layer of precious metal onto another surface using an electric current. This would fit with the advanced metallurgical skills known to exist in the region at the time. If true, it might explain how certain artifacts from the area exhibit unusually fine gold work, possibly aided by a process thought to be industrial age. But others are skeptical. Mainstream archaeologists argue that the Baghdad Battery may not be a battery at all. They suggest the object could have been used for storage of sacred scrolls, ritual objects, or even medicine containers. The copper and iron components in this view might be coincidental or at least non-electrical in purpose. After all, no evidence of wires, terminals, or even consistent replication of the device has been found. In this light, Koenig's theory might be seen as a modern mind projecting its expectations onto the past, an interpretation born of our own technological age. And yet, it's hard to dismiss the idea entirely. In the 1970s, experiments by researchers and television specials like those produced for the BBC and Discovery Channel attempted to reconstruct the device using the same materials. When filled with grape juice, lemon juice, or vinegar, the recreated batteries did indeed produce small but measurable voltages. Even more intriguingly, electroplating was possible in controlled setups using the devices, suggesting that the theory, while speculative, wasn't implausible. Still, critics argue that the absence of contextual evidence, such as tools for electroplating, consistent use across other sites, or any documentation, makes it highly unlikely that the Baghdad Battery was part of any widespread technological application. Some fringe theorists, of course, take the discovery even further. In books and documentaries, they've woven the Baghdad Battery into grander narratives. Evidence, they claim, of lost civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, or an ancient global knowledge network now buried beneath sand and time. To them, the battery is just one of many anomalies, alongside the pyramids, the Nazca lines, and the Antikythera Mechanism, that suggest our ancestors knew more than we give them credit for. But there's a more nuanced, less sensational possibility. The Baghdad Battery might represent something transitional, a kind of proto-discovery. Perhaps it wasn't a battery in the modern sense, but an artifact that accidentally revealed electrochemical properties, much like how alchemists stumbled upon chemical reactions before the birth of modern chemistry. It may have been a curious object, one that demonstrated strange effects when filled with certain liquids, passed around in priestly or scholarly circles, and then forgotten or ritualized. In that view, the Baghdad Battery is neither fraud nor miracle, but a glimpse into ancient experimentation, into the trial-and-error world that lies behind all great scientific discovery. Today, the original artifact sits quietly in the National Museum of Iraq, which has been closed on and off due to war, looting, and instability. For years, the battery, like many of Iraq's treasures, was inaccessible to scholars and the public alike. It remains a symbol of the deep, often fragile connection between our modern world and the civilizations that came before us. And whether it was truly a source of power or simply an oddity of ancient craft, its discovery ignites a powerful idea, that perhaps not all progress is linear, that knowledge may rise, fall, and rise again, like a voltage that once surged, then faded, only to be rediscovered centuries later. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. In the bustling heart of Delhi, surrounded by the ruins of ancient dynasties and echoing with the calls of modern life, stands a solitary column of iron that has confounded scientists, historians, and metallurgists for over a century. Towering over 7 meters tall and weighing more than 6 tons, the Iron Pillar of Delhi doesn't look like an artifact that should break history, but it quietly does. For over 1,600 years, this pillar has stood exposed to the brutal fluctuations of northern India's climate, the dry heat of the summer sun, the pounding monsoon rains, and the ceaseless flow of human history. Yet, astonishingly, it has not rusted. In an age where modern steel begins to corrode within years, even months in some environments, how did ancient blacksmiths forge a column of 99.72% pure iron that has withstood time's most corrosive force? The air itself? The Iron Pillar is located in the Qutb complex of Delhi, within the courtyard of the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, itself a repurposed site that was originally home to Hindu and Jain temples. The mosque and the surrounding structures were built by Qutbuddin Aibak, the founder of the Delhi Sultanate in the 12th century. But the pillar predates all of them. In fact, scholars agree that the pillar was most likely constructed during the reign of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya, a powerful emperor of the Gupta dynasty, around 400 CE. An inscription in Sanskrit, written in the ancient Brahmi script, adorns the shaft of the pillar. It honors the great king who erected it and speaks of his victories, likely over the Valakas, a group believed to have lived in what is now the Balkh region of modern-day Afghanistan. But the script doesn't mention anything unusual about the pillar's construction. No grand claims about anti-rust technology or metallurgical marvels. It seems to have been built as a standard victory monument, much like others across the ancient world. And yet, unlike nearly all its counterparts, the Iron Pillar has defied oxidation. For centuries, the true nature of its rust resistance was simply accepted as a curiosity, an oddity perhaps due to the dry climate or divine blessing. But as metallurgy advanced in the 20th century, scientists began to investigate more seriously. What they found was a technological sophistication that seems out of place for the time. Modern analysis revealed that the iron used to forge the pillar was of exceptional purity, far higher than most modern commercial iron. This meant it lacked many of the elements, like sulfur and magnesium, that typically promote corrosion. More importantly, the ancient metallurgists had unwittingly created a natural layer of protection known as misawite, a thin crystalline film of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate. This passive layer, only about 1/20th of a millimeter thick, formed as a result of the high phosphorus content in the iron and the absence of modern additives like lime. It bonded to the surface and created a self-repairing shield against moisture and oxygen. In essence, the pillar doesn't prevent rust. It controls and stabilizes it before it can spread. What makes this so extraordinary is that modern metallurgy only discovered similar techniques in the 20th century, often by accident or through extensive laboratory research. Yet the iron pillar, created with primitive furnaces and no understanding of atomic structure, achieved similar results through empirical wisdom, generational craftsmanship, or perhaps serendipity. But that's not all. The logistics of creating and erecting the pillar remain staggering. Ancient India did not possess modern forges, cranes, or industrial tools. The pillar would have been forged in segments, likely by a team of master blacksmiths working with charcoal furnaces and enormous hammers. Each section would have been heated and pounded into shape, then joined and refined through repeated forging, a process that could have taken months, if not years, to complete. Transporting a 6-ton iron column across hundreds of kilometers, possibly from the Udayagiri region or even further south, without roads, cranes, or modern carts, is a feat in itself. How they managed to lift it upright with such precision is still a matter of speculation. Some alternative historians have taken these feats as evidence of lost ancient knowledge, or even technologies that have since vanished. Theories abound that the pillar was created with unknown metallurgical secrets, or that ancient India possessed a deeper scientific understanding than is typically acknowledged. And perhaps that's not entirely far-fetched. India's ancient texts, like the Vedas and the Arthashastra, include descriptions of smelting, alloying, and crafting techniques. Temples and monuments throughout the subcontinent showcase unparalleled stonework and metallurgy, including massive bronze statues and intricately forged weapons. The pillar might represent the pinnacle of this cumulative wisdom, an achievement born of centuries of experimentation and skilled observation. Yet despite its resilience and grandeur, the iron pillar was not created for mystery. It was, at its heart, a symbol of victory and stability, a marker of civilization's endurance. The fact that it has withstood not only time but also the advance of empires, from the Mughals to the British, only enhances its mythic aura. Visitors to the Kutb complex once believed that embracing the pillar with one's back turned to it and arms wrapped around could bring good luck. This practice has since been restricted to protect the pillar, but the sense of reverence remains. Today, the iron pillar stands as more than just an artifact. It is a quiet rebuke to our assumptions that ancient people were primitive, that knowledge only flows forward, that modern science has all the answers. In its silent strength, it challenges the very narrative of technological progress, because sometimes what we call ancient is just knowledge we forgot how to remember. The Saqqara Bird. In the arid desert sands of Egypt, where the silent sentinels of time, the pyramids, rise like eternal echoes of a forgotten civilization, archaeologists uncovered a curious artifact. It was small, unassuming, made of sycamore wood, and shaped vaguely like a bird. It lacked any precious metals or ornate carvings that typically defined sacred objects of its time. And yet, this modest relic, known today as the Saqqara Bird, has puzzled and intrigued researchers for decades. Found in 1898 in a tomb in Saqqara, the vast necropolis near the ancient capital of Memphis, the wooden object was initially classified as a simple bird figurine. It was dated to around 200 BCE, during the Ptolemaic period of ancient Egypt. But when it was later catalogued more carefully and examined from an aerodynamic perspective, scholars noticed something unusual. It looked remarkably like a modern glider. The wings were straight, not curved like those of most birds. The tail, or rather the absence of a vertical stabilizer, was peculiar, and the symmetry, proportions, and smooth shape suggested intentional engineering, not mere artistic representation. The Saqqara Bird is about 14 centimeters long, with a wingspan of 18 centimeters, and it weighs just under 40 grams. But what truly ignited controversy was this. It doesn't resemble any known bird from ancient Egypt. In fact, its design bears a closer resemblance to modern aircraft models, particularly sailplanes or gliders, which, of course, didn't exist for another 2 millennia. For mainstream Egyptologists, the figurine remained a symbolic object, possibly representing the Ba, the bird-like spiritual essence in Egyptian mythology, often depicted as a bird with a human head. The Saqqara Bird may have been a ceremonial item, a child's toy, or a weather vane. After all, Birds were sacred in Egyptian culture. The falcon was associated with Horus, the ibis with Thoth, and the vulture with Nekhbet. But some researchers refused to accept that it was just a toy. In the 1960s, Egyptian physician and author Dr. Khalil Messaha brought renewed attention to the object, proposing a radical theory. What if the Saqqara bird was not just a symbolic carving, but a model of a functional flying machine? Messaha, who studied aerodynamics, noted that the artifact's proportions were strikingly close to those used in modern aviation. He suggested that the ancient Egyptians might have had knowledge of principles of flight, or at least experimented with airfoil shapes long before such ideas were formally articulated by people like Leonardo da Vinci or the Wright brothers. To test the theory, researchers and model builders constructed scaled replicas of the Saqqara bird, adjusting for missing components, most notably the tailplane, which may have been broken off or never attached. When fitted with a stabilizing horizontal tail, the model glided smoothly through the air. This raised a startling possibility. Could ancient Egyptians have created working gliders? Were they experimenting with air currents along cliffs or pyramid slopes? Was there a deeper scientific knowledge, hidden beneath the sands and beneath our assumptions, about aerodynamics and flight? Of course, no direct evidence exists of ancient aircraft in Egypt. There are no hangars, no engines, and no flight records carved into temple walls. But proponents of the flight theory argue that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when history is full of technological rediscoveries. They point to the Antikythera Mechanism from ancient Greece or the Baghdad Battery from Mesopotamia as examples of advanced ancient engineering lost to time. And then there are the so-called gliders found in South America, gold figurines from pre-Columbian cultures in Colombia, shaped like birds or insects, but bearing aerodynamic features that also resemble modern aircraft. These connections, while circumstantial, fuel the idea that the concept of flight may have fascinated ancient cultures far earlier than we believed. Skeptics, however, urge caution. They argue that retrofitting modern interpretations onto ancient objects can lead to anachronistic thinking, the tendency to see what we expect, rather than what is. The Saqqara bird, they insist, is best understood in its cultural and religious context. Its lack of inscriptions or accompanying records suggests it wasn't part of a larger technological system. Still, certain questions remain difficult to answer. Why would the wings be shaped the way they are, flat and slightly downward sloping, unless for aerodynamic reasons? Why was sycamore wood, known for being lightweight yet strong, chosen as the material? Could there have been lost knowledge, passed down through oral tradition, that inspired early experimentation with flight? It's easy to scoff at the idea of ancient airplanes. But then again, for centuries, we also dismissed the possibility that the Greeks had analog computers or that Iron Age craftsmen could forge rust-proof columns. What we now call impossible was often just forgotten or dismissed until rediscovered. The Saqqara bird is not proof that the Egyptians built gliders, but it is evidence that they may have understood more than we give them credit for. Whether a toy, a ritual object, or an early experiment in flight, it invites us to look beyond what we know and ask what we might have lost. In a world where ancient civilizations aligned temples with stars and built monuments to outlast empires, is it truly so strange to imagine that someone, somewhere, might have dreamed of riding the wind? The Dendera Light, deep in the sands of Egypt, where the Nile once nourished a civilization of enduring splendor, lies the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, a sanctuary carved in stone, dedicated to the goddess of music, love, and motherhood. Its pillars are heavy with the weight of time, its walls adorned with intricate hieroglyphs, celestial diagrams, and scenes of ancient rituals. But buried within one of its subterranean crypts is a carving that has sparked one of the most controversial theories in the study of ancient technology. To some, it is nothing short of a depiction of ancient electricity, a relic that, if interpreted literally, breaks the accepted timeline of human innovation. This carving, now widely known as the Dendera Light, portrays what appears to be a large bulb-shaped object, from which a serpent emerges, enclosed in an oval container and held aloft by a lotus flower. Behind the image, a figural arm reaches into the structure, and other figures seem to manipulate or support it. It's an unusual scene, one that looks dramatically different from the standard religious iconography that fills the rest of the temple. At first glance, it may not seem particularly special unless, that is, you see something more. To modern eyes, the image bears a striking resemblance to a modern electric light bulb, complete with a filament, glass envelope, and cable-like tube. And the figure supporting it, almost like a technician tending to a high-voltage device. The carving is located in a sealed crypt, one that was likely only accessible to high priests or specialized temple staff. The room has no windows and access is difficult. These factors lead some to speculate that the chamber may have once required artificial lighting, perhaps even electrical illumination. The theory of the Dendera Light as a form of ancient technology first gained traction in the 20th century, popularized by alternative historians like Eric von Daniken and David Hatcher Childress. According to them, the Egyptians, or possibly their mysterious precursors, may have possessed knowledge of electrical engineering long before it was officially discovered by humanity in the 18th and 19th centuries. Some point to the Baghdad Battery, a terracotta jar from ancient Mesopotamia with a copper cylinder and an iron rod, as possible evidence of early electrical experimentation. If electricity could be generated in the ancient world, they argue, might it also have been used to create light? Proponents of this theory suggest that the light bulb depicted at Dendera could be a form of Crookes tube or arc lamp, using primitive batteries to generate light through ionized gas. The snake inside the bulb is interpreted as a plasma filament, eerily similar to how electricity behaves inside a gas-filled tube. But mainstream Egyptologists remain firmly skeptical. To scholars trained in the history, language, and culture of ancient Egypt, the Dendera Light is not a technological diagram, but a religious and symbolic image. The bulb is not a light at all. It's a representation of the Harsamta serpent, a deity form of Horus, emerging from a lotus flower, which itself grows from the primordial waters of creation. The oval enclosure is seen as a protective bubble or womb, and the figures are engaged in a ritualistic scene, not an electrical operation. There is also no archaeological evidence supporting the existence of electric lights in ancient Egypt. No remnants of wiring, bulbs, switches, or generators have ever been found in any Egyptian site, and no written texts refer to artificial lighting beyond oil lamps, torches, and mirrored sunlight systems. Still, some lingering puzzles remain. The temple's deep interior chambers, such as the one containing the Dendera Light, are often devoid of soot or torch residue, which has led to speculation that lighting methods were either extraordinarily clean or perhaps something else entirely. Some have proposed the use of polished copper mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into temple corridors, but practical experiments show that mirrors lose too much light after only a few reflections. Others suggest the use of mineral-based luminescence or even chemical reactions to provide faint illumination. And yet, despite all rational explanations, the Dendera Light continues to captivate. Its form is so reminiscent of modern technology that it's hard not to imagine a different story. One in which humanity's technological arc is not a straight line, but a cycle of remembering and forgetting, of great leaps followed by great losses. Could it be that ancient civilizations stumbled upon forms of energy and light that we've only recently rediscovered? Could the Dendera carving be a coded blueprint, or at least a memory of a technological past far older than we've assumed? Perhaps the truth is less about the carving itself and more about how we interpret the unknown. The Dendera Light stands as a mirror, not just reflecting our curiosity, but our own desire to connect with a lost past, to believe that we are not the first, nor the only, to walk the path of innovation. Until definitive evidence is found, the Dendera Light remains suspended between two worlds, one of mythology and one of speculative science. A tantalizing image etched in stone, glowing with mystery in the dark halls of ancient Dendera. The mechanized gold airplanes, high in the lush jungles of Colombia, where rivers carve deep through rainforest and the skies hum with the sound of life. A different kind of hum has long fascinated scientists, skeptics, and dreamers alike. The metaphorical hum of flight, not modern, not mechanical, but ancient and mysterious. It began in the early 20th century, when archaeologists unearthed a collection of small golden figurines, each no more than a few inches long, scattered across sites connected to the Quimbaya civilization. These pre-Columbian artifacts, dating back over 1,000 years to around 500 to 800 CE, were mostly buried among other gold items, animals, insects, and abstract religious symbols, but several stood out. Unlike birds or fish or snakes, these zoomorphic figurines possessed features that didn't quite fit the known biological world. Triangular wings, upright tails, aerodynamic fuselages, and even what looked like stabilizers, in other words, elements that strongly resembled modern airplanes. To the average observer, they look more like jet planes or fighter aircraft than any creature from the natural world. Some even have what appears to be a cockpit. The streamlined shapes, the placement of wings toward the bottom of the body, and the vertical fins all contribute to this uncanny resemblance. These objects soon became known as the Quimbaya airplanes, and with them, a growing question took flight. Could the ancient people of South America have understood the principles of flight? Perhaps even practiced it? Alternative historians like Eric von Daniken, Giorgio Tsoukalos, and others saw the Quimbaya artifacts as possible evidence of ancient aerospace technology, or even extraterrestrial contact. According to their theories, the gold figurines were not merely decorative but scaled-down models of flying machines, preserved in metal by a civilization that may have seen or used real aircraft. Supporters of the ancient flight theory point to a now-famous 1994 experiment. In it, German aviation engineers Peter Belting and Algund Einbom created scaled-up versions of the gold figurines, adjusting them slightly with modern propulsion systems. To the amazement of onlookers, the models flew, and flew well. They glided, banked, and remained stable in the air, suggesting that the original designs, whether intentional or not, possessed legitimate aerodynamic qualities. So what are we to make of this? Are these truly evidence of lost technology, or even an ancient understanding of aerodynamics? Mainstream archaeologists and anthropologists remain cautious and largely unconvinced. To them, the gold figurines are consistent with stylized animal representations commonly found across South American cultures. The wings could be exaggerated fins, the cockpit just an artistic flourish, the vertical tail simply a stylized fishtail or part of the mounting structure. They emphasize that we shouldn't read too much into our modern interpretations of ancient art. We are naturally inclined to see familiar patterns in ambiguous forms, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. Critics of the ancient flight theory also point out the lack of contextual evidence. No runways, no hangars, no writings, no engines, no instructions, and certainly no remains of full-scale aircraft have ever been found. It would be a stretch, they argue, to believe that a civilization capable of flight left no other trace of such an extraordinary development. But others counter that history is full of technological mysteries and eras of knowledge that have been lost. The Antikythera Mechanism shows complex mechanical computation in ancient Greece. Roman concrete was more advanced than what followed for centuries. The Baghdad Battery hints at early electrochemical experimentation. So why not primitive flight in the Andes? The Quimbaya airplanes serve as an enigma resting on the edge of myth and material science. Whether they are merely symbolic artifacts, aesthetic interpretations of animals, or intentional records of something that once flew, remains unsolved. There is one final dimension worth considering: the symbolic power of the skies. Many ancient cultures, including the Inca, Maya, and Olmec, revered sky gods and celestial beings. Stories of flying deities, gods descending from the heavens in skyboats or fiery chariots, are found across South America. Could the Quimbaya have been trying to represent such beings? If so, perhaps the airplane-like forms are not physical machines at all, but sacred attempts to visualize the divine, combining animal and celestial elements into a single form. Or perhaps, just perhaps, these figurines are a whisper from a forgotten chapter of our history, one in which the skies were touched not only by dreams, but by wings of gold. Until we know for certain, the mechanized gold airplanes will remain suspended between science and speculation, between artifact and aircraft, glinting in museum light, ready to take off again in the imaginations of all who dare to believe that our past may be more incredible than we ever imagined. The giant footprint in Africa. Deep within the ancient granite formations of Mpuluzi, South Africa, not far from the Swaziland border, there lies an impression that has confounded geologists, archaeologists, and mystics alike. Roughly 4 feet long, embedded high on a vertical rock face, this indentation looks startlingly like a human footprint, but massively outsized, as if left by a person at least 25 feet tall. Locally, it is called the giant footprint of Africa, though some refer to it with an even more provocative name, God's footprint. This form is remarkably defined. You can clearly make out 5 distinct toes, a ball and arch, and even what appears to be the heel. It doesn't look accidental or abstract. It looks intentional, as if a colossal being stepped into soft earth long ago, and the print fossilized in time. The rock itself is estimated to be over 200 million years old, composed primarily of granite, one of the hardest and most ancient rock types on Earth. That dating alone raises immediate questions. If the footprint was indeed made when the granite was still malleable, which would be geologically unusual, then it would suggest a being of human-like form existed before the age of dinosaurs. And here's where the mystery begins to fracture the boundaries of conventional history. The local Zulu tribes have long spoken of giants in their oral traditions, beings who walked the earth in ancient times, before the current age of man. These stories often describe them as builders, guardians, or even fallen beings with knowledge beyond human comprehension. While many dismiss such tales as myth, the presence of a seemingly matching physical mark has breathed new life into these ancient narratives. It wasn't until 2002 that this footprint began attracting international attention. South African researcher Michael Tellinger, known for his investigations into ancient ruins and alternative history, visited the site and publicly called it one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for a lost race of giants. He described the print as mind-blowing, especially given its striking anatomical accuracy and its inaccessibility, situated on a steep rock face, high above the ground, in a remote location. He and others questioned how such an artifact could have been forged, faked, or altered without modern tools. But as always with such anomalies, there are 2 sharply divided schools of thought. On one side are those who believe the footprint could be genuine evidence of ancient giants, perhaps members of a species now extinct, or even non-human entities referenced in religious or mythological texts. The book of Genesis speaks of the Nephilim, the giants who were on the earth in those days. Hindu, Sumerian, and African mythologies all echo similar stories. To believers, the footprint is not just a mark in stone. It's a window into a forgotten epoch. On the other side, geologists and skeptics argue that this is a classic example of pareidolia, the brain's tendency to perceive familiar patterns, especially faces and body parts, in random forms. According to this view, the so-called footprint is the result of natural erosion, combined with fractures in the rock and weathering that coincidentally produced a human-like shape. They point out that granite is an igneous rock, formed under high heat and pressure deep underground. It does not typically retain impressions, especially not footprints, the way softer sedimentary rocks might. For such a print to exist in granite, the surrounding rock would have had to be molten or clay-like, and that contradicts everything we currently know about geological formation. Yet, the skeptic's explanation doesn't fully extinguish the sense of awe the site inspires. The sheer perfection of the shape, the dimensional depth of the toes, and the natural integration with the stone all raise legitimate doubts. If it is a coincidence, it's a perfect one. If it is a hoax, it is an ancient and inexplicable one. If it is real, then it challenges everything. There are no tool marks, no evidence of carving or sculpting, and no nearby artifacts to place it into a broader context. It simply exists, isolated and bold, like an exclamation point in the middle of a book with no pages. In the end, the giant footprint in Africa remains an open riddle, caught between myth and material, geology and speculation. It invites us to consider that perhaps our ancestors knew something we've forgotten, or that the earth itself may hold memories of beings and events lost to time, buried beneath layers of certainty we mistake for truth. One thing is certain. Whether carved by nature or left by something unimaginable, this footprint makes us look up, not just at the cliff, but toward the towering questions of our origins. Nanospirals of the Ural Mountains. In the remote, forested heart of Russia's Ural Mountains, a quiet mystery lies buried beneath layers of earth. Not towering monuments or ancient bones, but something far more perplexing. Between 1991 and 1993, while prospecting for gold along the Narada River, a group of geologists began finding strange, minuscule metallic objects embedded deep in the soil, at depths ranging from 10 to 40 feet below the surface. They were spirals, tiny, coiled metallic structures, microscopic in size, with forms uncannily similar to modern nanotechnology components. Some were shaped like springs or screws, others like perfect helices, with precise proportions and consistent diameters. The largest measured about 3 centimeters, while the smallest were less than 1/10,000th of an inch, far too small to see without magnification. What truly shocked researchers wasn't just the shape or size, it was what they were made of and how old they might be. The spirals were found to be composed of copper, tungsten, and molybdenum, metals commonly used today in aerospace, electronics, and nuclear technology because of their high resistance to heat and conductivity. Tungsten, in particular, has a melting point of over 3,400 degrees Celsius, making it notoriously difficult to work with. And yet, these coils seemed manufactured with uniform geometries that suggested intentional fabrication, not random formation. Early analysis by the Russian Academy of Sciences estimated that the objects were between 20,000 and 318,000 years old, based on the stratigraphic layers in which they were found. This raised an immediate and uncomfortable question. Who or what could have created microscopic metal coils hundreds of thousands of years ago? To many, the answer bordered on the impossible. Humanity's earliest known attempts at working metal only date back around 6,000 years, and even then, such ancient metallurgists were smelting simple copper or bronze tools, nowhere near the precision or scale of the Narada spirals. Nanotechnology, as we understand it today, is still a frontier of 21st century science. To suggest that something similar existed in the Paleolithic era forces us to either rewrite history or expand the definition of intelligence on Earth. As word of the discovery spread, comparisons began to swirl. Some likened the structures to microantennas or transmission components. Others speculated they could be biomechanical devices, perhaps even remnants of alien probes or ancient machines that once surveyed the Earth long before human civilization emerged. A few theorists posited that they were fragments of an ancient civilization's lost technology, one that may have perished in a cataclysm, leaving behind only molecular-scale relics beneath the soil. Despite the speculative buzz, attempts to formally investigate the spirals were inconclusive and quietly shelved. The objects were studied by several institutes, including the Moscow Institute of Technology and the Central Scientific Research Department of Geology. But in the late 1990s, the Russian government reportedly closed further access to the region, citing environmental concerns. Some of the samples vanished into private collections, while others were said to be contaminated during transport. Today, only a handful remain, tucked away in obscure academic archives, with no major research papers ever published in Western journals. The silence has only amplified the sense of mystery and suspicion. Critics, of course, have their explanations. Some say the spirals could be fragments from experimental mining equipment, accidentally shed into the soil and buried over the years. Others suggest they are the result of natural crystallization processes, their geometric forms shaped by mineral forces rather than machines. Yet none of these hypotheses fully account for the precision, scale, or depth at which the spirals were found. Even more puzzling, why are they localized only to this remote section of the Urals? And why haven't similar objects been uncovered elsewhere if the cause is mechanical contamination or geology? Supporters of the more radical theories point to one undeniable truth. If authentic, these spirals are out-of-time technological artifacts found in layers of Earth where technology was not supposed to exist. Their existence suggests either a forgotten advanced civilization, a non-human intelligence, or perhaps a misunderstanding of our own timeline. In the end, the nanospirals of the Ural Mountains serve as one of the most delicate yet disruptive anomalies ever found. They aren't carved into cliffs or etched into stone. They're nearly invisible, small enough to pass unnoticed by the naked eye, yet potent enough to challenge the foundations of archaeology, metallurgy, and history itself. What else might lie waiting in the soil? Not towering monuments, but microscopic echoes of an intelligence we've yet to comprehend. Ending. And now, as our journey comes to a close, which of these impossible discoveries intrigued you the most? Was it the precision of the Antikythera Mechanism, the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript, Or perhaps those microscopic spirals hidden deep in the Urals? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We read each one carefully. Do you think history is more mysterious than we've been told? Or is there always a rational explanation waiting just beneath the surface? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, don't forget to like the video. It helps more than you know. Subscribe for more stories that bend time, space, and belief. And if you'd like to stay updated whenever we release something new, tap the bell. It keeps you connected to every chapter of the strange and unexplained. And of course, share this video with someone who still believes that history has secrets left to reveal. Until next time, stay curious,